Hello, Patriots. I'm Lee Watts, and this is Patriot Point, your source for Kentucky news and analysis from a conservative, Christian, and common sense point of view. Well, this week we have some news that for the most part is not being covered in the mainstream media, and it is about how Kentucky conservatives are being shot at. If this was happening to a group of liberals, it would be all over all of the media in our state, but it's hardly being talked about because it's conservatives. Let me give you an example of what's going on. If you remember back in February, Kentucky's former state representative Wesley Morgan, an outspoken conservative, was shot in his home. His daughter was shot and killed. That happened in Madison County. Then this past week over in Lewis County, more outspoken conservatives have their family shot at. And then on Tuesday of this week, my family in my house was shot at. Bullets coming through the house, through the walls. And so I asked the police, I said, is this a random occurrence? And it can't be too random because I live in a nice neighborhood. It's not like we get drive-bys all the time. So they said, well, based on what you do, maybe somebody is trying to send a message. Well, if that is the case, and if anybody out there is trying to send me a message, let me say, I heard your message, and this is my reply.
Eat lead, slackers!
That's right, eat lead, slackers. You are not going to scare me out of standing up and speaking out on conservative issues. And you better hope the police find you, and I don't, because according to my military certifications, I'm an expert marksman. And it'll just be like, I like how Clint Eastwood put it at the end of the movie Unforgiven. He's like, if you come after me, I'm going to shoot you, your dog, and then burn your house down. Well, I'm not going to be shooting any dogs. I like dogs. Might shoot a cat. Don't really like cats. But anyway, I'm going to be coming after you, and you better hope the police find you first. Now, let's think about this. If it is Democrats who had been targeted, liberals and leftists, there would be all this push for gun controls crying out throughout our entire state, may even get some national attention. And it's always the left who is pushing for gun control, and yet, ironically, it is the left is the one that is doing the shootings. Just remember, just back here the other week on the 4th of July, there was that shooting happen, and they have this guy, his name is Robert Eugene Crimo, whatever it is. And they're like, well, this is a shooting, so we need to come out and have more gun control. Joe Biden called for it that day, Kamala Harris, and they want to blame the conservatives. Does this guy look like a conservative to you? No, it's a raging liberal. Almost all of the shootings are not done by the conservatives. We're often the ones who are accused, and they say, well, it'll probably be done by a conservative. Yet we keep seeing it is the ultra-liberal left that keeps doing the shootings. Let me give you some history on this. The first president that got shot was Abraham Lincoln, a Republican shot by a Democrat. Next was James Garfield, a Republican shot by a Democrat. After that was President McKinley, a Republican shot by a Democrat. After that, you've got JFK. Even though they say Lee Harvey Oswald did it, I think somebody else was behind that. After that, you got President Ronald Reagan, a Republican shot by a Democrat. So we repeatedly keep seeing it is the left that during all of their riots and protests are burning cities to the ground, using firearms, looting and destroying. When conservatives have a big rally, we don't see those type things. But that's always what the left accuses us of what they are actually doing. Now let's think about gun control here. I like to give a quote from President Reagan. Now keep in mind, President Reagan was himself shot. And notice what he said about gun rights and gun control after this. You won't get control by disarming law-abiding citizens. Those who seek to inflict harm are not fazed by gun controllers. I happen to know this from personal experience. President Reagan once again hit the nail on the head. All that gun grab laws do and gun control laws is take away weapons from law-abiding citizens. People who are going to shoot you and break the law don't obey gun restriction laws. Whenever you see a sign that says no guns allowed on the premises, if you were a criminal who was going to go shoot a bunch of people and you saw a sign that says you're not allowed to carry a gun here, is that going to change your mind and be like, well, I can't shoot people here because there's a sign on the door? No, all that does is disarm law-abiding citizens. What does the Bible say about carrying a weapon on you or having weapons in your home? Well, Jesus Christ himself is speaking in the book of Luke, chapter number 11, verse 21, and Jesus said these words, "When a strong man armed keepeth his palace, his goods are in peace." So here we have Jesus himself saying, listen, if you want to be in peace in your palace, your home, you need to be armed. Jesus also said to the disciples, "He that hath no sword, let him sell his cloak and buy one." So he's like, we need to carry a weapon on ourselves with our group to keep us safe. And he went on to say, you need to keep one in your house as well. I'm happy to tell you, I keep weapons on my person. I keep them in my house. And I've given gifts of weapons to all of my family members as well. Again, you better hope the police find you, sucker, and not me. Now, let me give you a little bit of American history on this issue. This is not the first time that an outspoken preacher who's conservative has been targeted by those who are oppressing. Back during the Revolutionary War, there was a preacher by the name of Pastor James Caldwell. He was known as the high priest of the rebellion because he would get up in his pulpit and he would just rail away in public in front of everybody on the wickedness of the oppression of the British government officials. He'd call out the king, he'd call out the governors, he'd call out the mayors. He was so outspoken they threatened to kill him. So every week he would have 2 musket pistols and cross them over his pulpit so that he could defend himself and his people in case the British came in and tried to shoot them. Well, one day they tried to make good on their threat. The British did the very first drive-by that was ever done in American history. But they drove by on a horse and they shot through the window. They didn't hit Pastor Caldwell. They did, however, hit his wife. So Pastor Caldwell, after this, he comes out and says, listen, I can no longer just preach against the British, preach against these government officials. I've got to go out and fight them full time. So he joins the Continental Army and he helps fight alongside of Washington and the Continental Army. Well, then comes the Battle of Springfield, June the 23rd of 1780. The Americans have the high ground and the British are trying to take the hill. Well, the Americans run out of wadding. Wadding is that little paper that you shove down a musket barrel that helps it to fire. Without those little papers, the musket will not fire. Well, when the Americans started to run out of these papers, the wadding, Pastor Caldwell gets up and he runs away inside of a church building there on the hilltop. Some people thought he was scared and he was running for cover. That wasn't it at all, because a few minutes later, this preacher comes back out of the church building and he's holding big stacks of songbooks written by the songwriter Isaac Watts. And until I hear different, that's my ancestor. If you were to look at your hymn book in your church even today and see who wrote the songs, even in a lot of our modern hymn books are songs by the hymn writer Isaac Watts. And there was lots of sound doctrine in those hymns that Watts had written. So Pastor Caldwell, he starts taking the pages of these Isaac Watts songbooks, and he starts ripping the pages out and handing the papers to the American soldiers. And he said these words, "Pump the British full of lead and doctrine. Give 'em Watts, boys, give 'em Watts." Here's a painting from the American Revolution. The painting is called "Give 'em Watts." And you can see there Pastor Caldwell passing the Watts hymn books to the soldiers for them to use in their muskets to fight the battle. The Americans did win the Battle of Springfield, due in part to the efforts of that preacher who was an outspoken conservative who was fighting against oppressors with everything that he had. And this was really the attempt where the British lost control of New Jersey during the American Revolution. I teach all kinds of lessons using history and Bible to teach 2 different series of lessons. One of them is called Biblical Principles About Weapons, what the Bible and history teach us about your right to keep and bear arms. I do another series that is the series of the Black Robed Regiment, which is a role that pastors and other church leaders played in the American Revolution. If you would like to have either one of these videos, then just visit my website, which is godandcountryministry.com, and you can see those there, and I hope that they will be a blessing for you. If you'd like me to come, I've taught this lesson at many different churches and patriot groups. Be happy to come out to yours and to do that. If you want to arrange a meeting for me to come out and teach this lessons in person, just send me an email at lee.watts.kentucky@gmail.com. We'll be happy to arrange to do that. So, dear conservatives, what do you need to be doing about this? Well, you need to stay informed, you need to stay involved, and you need to stay armed. And that is becoming more important every single day. So anybody out there who is trying to send me a message, just remember this. You better hope the police get you and I don't. And if you should try again and should happen to hit my family, I'll spend every cent that I've got to have you tracked down, and then I will take care of the situation myself, and you will not be around when there is a day in court. Well, that's why you need to tune in each and every week to Patriot Point. All kinds of stuff going on here you're not going to hear on the mainstream media. So until next week, dear Patriots, this is Lee Watts for Patriot Point reminding you that liberty is not a spectator sport.